She only wanted a bowl of soup, but fate, desire, and a human's fire were waiting. Sit tight, this HFY story begins now. The cacophony of Nexus Trade Station never ceased. The sprawling hub of commerce and survival was a place of constant movement, voices shouting deals in dozens of languages, the clang of machinery as freighters unloaded goods, the acrid smell of coolant mixed with spices from 100 worlds. For most, it was the rhythm of opportunity, but for Aya, it was the rhythm of her downfall. Once she had walked through corridors of polished stone and gardens of music on her homeworld Serene. Once the daughter of a diplomat had worn flowing robes dyed with sunrise hues, her blue skin glowing with intricate pale markings of lineage. Once she had believed in harmony and peace. Now she was a shadow skin, dulled robes torn to rags, stomach clenching with hunger that felt like knives twisting in her belly. Her ears, more sensitive than a human's, caught every harsh sound as she pressed herself against a wall in the lower bazaar. She had been surviving on scraps for 3 full cycles, ducking into maintenance ducts to sleep, avoiding patrols that would seize undocumented refugees. Twice already, station security had nearly caught her, and she had overheard whispers of what awaited those processed without papers, contracts to mining colonies, or worse, to private labor contractors who treated sentients like tools. Aya shivered, pulling the remnants of her braids tighter around her face, as though they could shield her from reality. Her world was gone, burned to dust by the Krell Dominion. Their warships had descended when Serene refused to yield its crystallization technology. In a single week, the gardens, the towers, the libraries, the millions of voices had all been silenced, leaving Aya as one of the few survivors scattered into the void. The ache in her chest never ceased, but the ache in her belly had begun to eclipse even grief. Hunger had become her constant companion, gnawing at her insides until she felt less like a person and more like an animal driven by the single need to eat. This evening, the bazaar was winding down. Artificial lights dimmed to mimic the station's night cycle. Vendors were packing up their stalls, sweeping away crumbs and discarding unwanted produce before the cleaning drones came to sterilize everything. Aya moved carefully among them, her sharp eyes scanning for a scrap that hadn't yet been claimed. She hated what she had become, scavenger beggar, but pride was a luxury long since stripped away. Then she smelled it. It hit her senses like a physical blow, an aroma so rich, so intoxicating that her knees weakened. Savory and layered, it spoke of warmth, of hearth, of home, things she hadn't felt since before the fire consumed Serene. Her mouth flooded with saliva, her body betraying her restraint. Against all instinct, she abandoned caution and followed the scent like a creature bewitched. The trail led her to a narrow pod wedged between larger establishments. Unlike the gaudy holographic signs flashing across the concourse, this place bore only a simple illuminated plaque with bold letters "In Trade Standard Earth Eats." Through a transparent partition, she glimpsed the source of the aroma, a human male moving with precision over a simmering pot. Aya had heard of humans. The species had joined the galactic community scarcely 70 years ago, after inventing faster-than-light travel, seemingly out of stubborn defiance. They were considered unpredictable, emotional, adaptable, occasionally reckless. She had never spoken to one, but she knew they fascinated other races for their tenacity. This one was tall, broad-shouldered, with olive-toned skin and dark hair cropped short. His sleeves were rolled above muscular forearms, inked with strange markings. He stirred the pot with intense focus, unaware of her wide-eyed stare. She did not realize how long she had been watching until he looked up. Their gazes collided. Panic surged through her veins, caught. Her body tensed to flee, but hunger held her rooted. To her surprise, his expression softened. He raised a hand, gesturing her closer. Aya's heart hammered. It could be a trap. He could alert security or worse, sell her to the contractors. Yet the scent of food was unbearable temptation. Trembling, she edged inside. "Sit," the human commanded, his voice deep, carrying an accent she couldn't place. He pointed to a stool in the corner. Obediently, she perched on the edge, ready to spring away at the first hint of danger. The kitchen gleamed, everything clean, utensils arranged with exact precision. Without ceremony, the human ladled soup into a bowl, set a spoon beside it, and slid it across the counter toward her. "Eat," he said. Aya hesitated only a heartbeat before scooping a spoonful. The first taste exploded across her tongue, rich broth infused with unfamiliar spices, vegetables softened to perfection, layers of flavor that soothed even as they shocked her palate. A moan of involuntary pleasure escaped her lips. She devoured the bowl, and when it was empty, he filled it again. After the third serving, she leaned back, sated for the first time in weeks, tears prickling her eyes. I have no credits, she whispered in trade standard, her voice hoarse from disuse. This is free, the human replied, wiping his hands on a cloth. His tone softened. But you need work. Aya blinked, startled. Work. In the kitchen, he said, do you know how? She thought of her mother's words, to understand food is to understand culture. On Serene, she had been taught culinary arts as part of her diplomatic training. Yes, she said cautiously. I can prepare food, I can clean, I learn quickly. The human studied her for a long, waited moment. Then he nodded. I'm David. Morning shift, 6 station hours, food and 10 credits per day. Be here. Don't be late. Her breath caught. Hope, fragile and bright, fluttered in her chest. She straightened her shoulders, trying to recover some shred of dignity. I'm Aya, I accept. David reached beneath the counter and withdrew a package. Cleansing Facility Section 44B. Clothes 2. Use them. She accepted the bundle with trembling fingers. Inside were simple gray garments and a voucher for the public showers. It was more than charity, it was restoration of dignity. For the first time since watching her planet burn, Aya felt like a person again. I'll be here, she promised. Thank you, Chef David. Just David, he corrected with a faint smile. Now go rest. Tomorrow will be hard work. When Aya stepped back into the dimming bazaar, clutching her package, she carried something new within her. Not just a full stomach, but the ember of possibility. She found a quiet corner in the refugee sector, washed herself in warm water for the first time in weeks, and slept clothed-fed and dreaming not of fire but of kitchens. The next morning she returned at dawn cycle. Her braids were freshly cleaned, her skin scrubbed until the blue markings glimmered faintly once more. The gray tunic fit loosely, but she wore it with pride. Stepping into Earth Eats, she felt nerves coil in her stomach. Would he regret his offer? Would he change his mind? The kitchen bustled with activity already. David moved with economical grace, his knife flashing as he reduced vegetables into uniform cubes. Without looking up, he pointed. Wash hands, then dice these 1 centimeter. Uniform. Aya obeyed. The rhythm of the knife, the clean smell of fresh-cut roots, the sound of sizzling pans, these were anchors against chaos. As she worked, she realized something unexpected. She was not surviving. She was living. And in that moment, Aya knew that a single bowl of soup had changed everything. Aya quickly discovered that David's kitchen was a place of order. Everything had its place, every movement a purpose. The utensils gleamed as if polished. Each cycle, the shelves were labeled in block letters, the floors scrubbed until no grease clung. For someone who had been scavenging behind trash receptacles, the immaculate precision was both intimidating and comforting. David rarely spoke unless necessary. His instructions were short-clipped, yet always exact. Dice smaller, 1 centimeter, uniform. Flavor must be consistent. He corrected her hand posture with the briefest touch, guiding her fingers into the proper grip. His eyes, sharp as blades, missed nothing. At first, Aya feared she would fail him. Her hands trembled from weakness, her body still adjusting to regular meals. Yet as she diced, chopped, and stirred, the training from her youth resurfaced like an old song. On Serene, the daughters of diplomats were taught not just politics, but hospitality. To share food is to share peace, her mother used to say. She remembered standing in her family's kitchen garden, learning which herbs soothed the spirit and which spices awakened conversation. One afternoon, as she carefully arranged sliced vegetables into symmetrical rows, David glanced at her work and raised an eyebrow. You've trained before? Aya froze a little. On my world, it was expected. Expected. His knife did not pause, continuing its relentless rhythm through a pile of onions. Diplomats host banquets, she explained softly. Food was part of cultural exchange. My mother believed that to understand a people, you must understand what they eat. For the first time, David's rhythm faltered. He looked at her, really looked with something almost like respect. She was right. Aya blinked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. Over the next cycle, she found herself learning his ways. David cooked differently from anyone she had ever seen. He moved like a dancer, each motion efficient, each step measured. He spoke to his ingredients as though they were old friends, coaxing flavor rather than forcing it. And his knives, Aya marveled at them. Unlike the station's standard issue, these were crafted with care, balanced perfectly, their edges gleaming with menace and beauty. "These are not local," she remarked one morning, holding one lightly, testing its weight. "Custom Japanese steel," David replied, eyes narrowing slightly as if uncertain whether to share. From Earth, she asked, curiosity tinged with reverence. He nodded once. Aya ran her finger carefully along the spine, not the blade. Earth must have remarkable craftsmen. A flicker of pride touched his lips. "We have our moments." It was strange. He was gruff, stern, often distant. Yet in those fleeting moments, Aya glimpsed warmth. She began to measure her days by them, the almost smiles, the rare compliments, the subtle gestures of approval when she mastered a technique. One evening after a long shift, a delivery arrived. Exotic ingredients sealed in containers marked with bioscans. David unpacked them with reverence. "This is saffron," he explained, holding up delicate red threads. "Worth more than gold by weight on Earth. Just a few strands can change everything." Aya stared transfixed. "We had something similar. Sunrise petals. My mother would use them for celebration meals." Her voice trembled at the memory. David studied her face. "Your world," he said quietly. "It's gone, isn't it?" Aya nodded, focusing on her chopping to hide the pain. "The Krell wanted our crystallization technology. When we refused, they made an example." His jaw tightened. "I'm sorry." 2 words. Simple but genuine. Aya's throat closed. She had heard pity before, but never empathy that cut so true. She blinked rapidly, pushing the tears back. Changing the subject, she gestured at the pot. "These recipes, they aren't standard station fare, they're personal." David's gaze turned inward. "Family recipes, with my own touch." "They're extraordinary," Aya whispered, remembering the soup that had saved her. That night, she lay in her small cot behind the kitchen staring at the ceiling. For the first time since Sereni's destruction, she wasn't replaying screams and fire. Instead, she saw saffron threads between his fingers. She heard his voice saying, "I'm sorry," and she felt a flicker of something dangerous attachment. The customers came steadily. Dock workers with grease-stained uniforms, traders, smelling of alien spices, even occasional station officials. They came for something different, something beyond the bland, nutrient paste sold by corporations. And as they ate, Aya watched David transform. The stern chef softened, listening to compliments, with quiet nods offering dish recommendations, with a faint curl of lip that might almost be humor. During a lull, her curiosity overcame restraint. "The markings on your arms," she said, nodding at the ink visible where his sleeves rolled up. "Clan identifiers, status symbols." David glanced down, almost as if he had forgotten they were there. "No, just reminders." "Of what?" "Mistakes, lessons, the past." His voice held finality, a wall she dared not breach. But fate breached it for her. One evening, a customer entered, well-dressed human with a swagger that spoke of entitlement. The man froze when he saw David. "Holy shit. It's really you, David Reynolds." Aya saw the blood drain from David's face. "You're mistaken," David said coldly. "Like hell," the man laughed. "3 Michelin stars. The Emperor of Fusion, darling of the culinary world. Until—" "Order or leave," David snapped. The man grinned, enjoying his discomfort. "Does anyone else know you're hiding here?" Something in David's tone made the man think twice. He ordered, smirked, and left a generous tip. "Still the best, Reynolds, no matter what they say." The kitchen fell silent. David stood motionless, staring at nothing. "David Reynolds," Aya said softly. He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw not strength but vulnerability. That was someone else. A lifetime ago. Aya moved closer, drawn to the crack in his armor. "I understand hiding, creating a new self when the old one is too painful." His eyes lingered on hers. "And what do you see when you look at me?" Her heart pounded. "I see someone who creates beauty from simple ingredients. Someone who fed a starving stranger. Someone running just like me." The air between them shifted, charged. She could smell the blend of spices on his skin, feel the heat radiating from him. Your perspective, he murmured, voice low as refreshing. Most people only see what they expect. My people believe in seeing with more than our eyes, she whispered, a small smile tugging her lips. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth. And what do your other senses tell you? Aya felt warmth spread through her, a flush not from the stove. That there's more to your story than you tell, and I'd like to hear it. The moment stretched electric before David cleared his throat and stepped back. Lunch rush. We should prepare. But his voice was different now, warmer, gentler. Days passed in rhythm. Chop, sear, serve. Each day Aya grew stronger, her skin regaining vibrance, her markings brightening with health. And each day she became more attuned to David. The brush of his arm, the way his eyes softened when she succeeded, the rare, almost secret smile when she hummed a serene melody. 2 weeks later, she found herself in the kitchen after hours experimenting, whisking eggs with cream, adding saffron herbs. David appeared curious. What are you making? Something new. On Sereni, we had nari, a savory custard. I'm trying to recreate it with your ingredients. He tasted it when it was done, his face shifting from curiosity to surprise to pleasure. Remarkable. Familiar yet new. Aya beamed. For the first time since exile, she felt like herself again. David touched her hand deliberately. You haven't lost who you are, Aya. You found a new way to express it. Her breath caught at the warmth of his skin. Is that what you did? Found a new expression after what happened. His eyes darkened. I was the youngest chef to win 3 Michelin stars. Revolutionary, they called me. Until betrayal destroyed everything. His voice turned bitter. So you ran. I wandered, cooked across colonies. Until here. His thumb traced circles on her hand. It was enough. Until you. Me. You reminded me what it means to create with purpose. To see food as connection, as intimacy. Aya leaned closer, whispering, on Sereni, food is the first level of intimacy. The second is stories. The third, touch, she finished, gaze locked to hers. They kissed, tentative at first, then fierce. Aya's hands found his shoulders, his lips pressed against hers with fire. Desire surged, alien yet universal. When they parted, David rested his forehead to hers. I've wanted this since you walked into my kitchen. I've wanted you too, she admitted. The kitchen, once only a place of survival, had become something more. A sanctuary, a beginning. The kiss changed everything. Aya returned to her quarters that night with lips still tingling and thoughts spinning faster than station traffic lanes. She had not meant for it to happen yet. The truth was undeniable. From the moment she tasted his food, David had been drawing her closer. Now, after weeks of working side by side, their bond had leapt into something fragile, dangerous, and thrilling. The following morning, David behaved as though nothing unusual had occurred. His instructions were crisp, his knife work mercilessly precise. Yet when Aya passed him a tray, his fingers lingered a fraction too long against hers. When their eyes met across the steaming pots, there was an undercurrent neither could ignore. They poured themselves into the work as if channeling all unspoken emotions into their craft. Together, they began experimenting with combining techniques. Aya introduced Sereni methods, slow crystallization of sauces, layering flavors in delicate strata, weaving herbs into braids that released their essence over time. David countered with earth traditions, searing at blistering heat to lock in juices, balancing acidity with sweetness, coaxing depth from fermentation. Their first true collaboration was born one late evening. Aya suggested incorporating a Sereni root that, when sliced thin and steamed, released a subtle floral tang. David paired it with Earth's aged soy reduction and charred protein strips. When they plated it, the aroma alone was intoxicating. A weary dock worker was their test subject. He took one bite and froze, eyes wide. Then he laughed, a booming sound that startled the quiet kitchen. Tastes like home and adventure at once, he declared, demanding another portion. Word spread quickly. Soon lines formed outside Earth Eats, curious aliens and humans alike, eager to taste this strange new fusion. Dock workers rubbed elbows with traders, merchants, with mechanic species that rarely mingled, finding common ground over shared dishes. Aya watched it unfold with wonder. What had started as survival had become something bigger, food as diplomacy, food as unity. In quiet moments, Aya and David allowed themselves to explore the fragile intimacy growing between them. One evening after closing, Aya found herself leaning against the counter while David tallied earnings. "Why do you do it?" she asked suddenly. He looked up. "Do what? Cook like this?" With such care. "Even when customers don't understand half of what you're doing." He shrugged. "Because it matters. Food is memory, connection. It's how I make sense of the world." Aya tilted her head. "That's not the answer of an ordinary station cook." Something flickered in his expression. He set the ledger aside, leaning back against the counter. "I wasn't always ordinary." She waited. Finally, he said, "I was David Reynolds, youngest chef to earn 3 Michelin stars on Earth. Critics called me revolutionary. I built a restaurant in Singapore that was booked months ahead. Then my partner embezzled millions. Criminal syndicates laundered money through our business. I knew nothing, but it didn't matter. My reputation was ruined. No one believed me." Aya's chest tightened. "So you ran." He gave a bitter smile. "I wandered, cooked in colonies where no one cared about stars or critics, until I found this station." Silence stretched between them. Then Aya reached across the counter, resting her hand on his. "You haven't lost who you are, David. You've just found a different way to express it." His eyes softened, and in that moment she felt the walls between them crumble further. Their romance grew in stolen moments, a shared laugh while chopping vegetables, fingers brushing when passing utensils, a lingering look across the heat of the stoves. One night, Aya prepared a serene custard dish using earth ingredients to mimic her lost flavors. David tasted it, eyes widening. "This is transcendent, silky, complex, familiar, yet utterly new." She beamed at his praise. "It's the first time I've felt like myself since everything." He reached out deliberately, touching her hand. "Aya, you haven't lost yourself. You've evolved." The electricity in that touch became a fire when their lips met again, fiercer than the first time. They moved together in the small quarters behind the kitchen, exploring with curiosity and reverence. Aya's people believed intimacy was a harmony of energies, and she felt it now, the fusion of two souls, different yet perfectly complementary. Afterward, lying entwined, she traced the tattoos on his arms. Herbs, knives, flames, even dish names inked in earth script. "These are your stories," she murmured. "And your markings?" he asked, brushing pale patterns on her blue skin. "They show I descend from the house of morning light. Diplomats for 12 generations." Her voice caught. "I may be the last. Then we'll make sure they're remembered." David promised, holding her closer. Their bond spilled over into their food. Each new dish they created bore echoes of both worlds. Earth's fire, Serene's subtlety, David's boldness, Aya's precision. The customers could taste it even if they couldn't name it. "It feels alive," one alien merchant said, licking his fingers clean. Soon lines stretched beyond the quarter. Word of their cuisine spread across the station. Competitors muttered resentfully, but Earth Eats thrived. Aya felt her strength returning, her blue skin vibrant again, her braids shining. For the first time since her planet's destruction, she felt pride. Not as a diplomat's daughter, but as herself. Yet success carried risk. Aya noticed strangers lingering too long, asking questions not about the food, but about her. One evening, a Vantian trader snapped a picture of their menu and hurried off. Aya's stomach twisted with unease. The dishes bore Serene techniques known only to her people. If the wrong eyes saw them, David noticed her tension. "What is it?" "The Krell," she whispered. "They wanted our crystallization knowledge. If they recognize these methods," he placed a firm hand on hers, "then we'll face it together." His certainty steadied her, but fear lingered like a shadow at the edge of the light. 2 weeks turned to a month. Earth Eats was no longer just a food stall. It was a gathering place, a crossroads where species mingled without suspicion. Morton the Brell became their unofficial bouncer, Pax the Quillian, their tireless dishwasher. Refugees, traders, officials, all came not just to eat, but to belong. Aya marveled at it. Once she had been a starving fugitive. Now she was part of something larger, something vibrant. And at the heart of it was David Stern, scarred yet endlessly creating beauty from chaos. One night after a particularly successful service, Aya leaned against him as they cleaned. "On Serene," she said softly, "we believe the greatest unions created harmony greater than the sum of their parts, like fusion. David kissed her hair, his voice low, like us. The next day, the illusion of safety cracked. A well-dressed alien customer entered Chef Grell, once the most lauded cook on Nexus Station. His scaled skin shimmered gray, his slit eyes narrowing as he surveyed the crowd flocking to Earth Eats. He ordered a dish with false politeness, then tasted it slowly, sneer curling his lip. Interesting, he drawled, unrefined, but novel. I see why the rabble like it. His gaze slid to Aya. Your assistant's techniques are unusual. Serenity, perhaps. Aya froze, blood draining from her face. David's expression hardened. Enjoy your meal, Grell, or leave. The rival chef smirked. Enjoy it while it lasts, Reynolds. Fashions change, and some secrets attract dangerous attention. When he departed, Aya shivered. She recognized the threat, and she knew the Krell would not be far behind. That night, David found her sitting alone, staring into the dark. You're worried, he said. They'll come for me, she whispered. For what I know. I don't want to bring ruin on you. He crouched beside her, lifting her chin until their eyes met. Aya, listen to me. I lost everything once, my name, my career, my home. But the moment you walked into my kitchen, I started living again. I will not lose you. Whatever comes, we face it together. Her chest ached with emotion. David. He silenced her with a kiss firm and certain. In that moment, Aya believed him. For the first time, she believed survival was not enough. She could have more. She could have love. Success carried its own dangers. Within 2 months, Earth Eats was no longer a curiosity, but a phenomenon. Lines stretched down the concourse. Station gossip turned on the question of what dish Reynolds and his blue-skinned partner would unveil next. Traders scheduled stops on Nexus simply to taste the fusion that combined Earth boldness with serene elegance. The air around their stall buzzed with conversation, laughter, and the steady clatter of utensils. For Aya, it was surreal. She remembered crouching in alleys begging for scraps. Now she stood behind a polished counter, her braids gleaming, her skin vibrant with health. When she looked at David, focused, commanding, alive, she felt as though together they had built a sanctuary not just for themselves, but for everyone who walked through the door. Yet shadows lengthened at the edges of that light. She noticed unfamiliar faces loitering too long. Customers who asked questions less about food and more about her origins. A reptilian merchant who scrutinized her markings. A droid whose optical sensors lingered on her hands as she prepared sauces. Aya's stomach tightened each time. Serenity techniques were rare, recognizable. If the Krell Dominion suspected, David noticed too. One evening as they cleaned after closing, he said quietly, "You think they've found you." Aya's knife stilled. Not yet, but soon. He set down the pan he was scrubbing, turned to her. Then we'll deal with it. Together. The words were stead, but Aya saw the tension in his jaw. The first strike came not from the Krell, but from closer to home. Chef Grell. He had once been the darling of the Nexus culinary scene, a McLaren cook whose 6 arms worked in unison like a symphony. For years, his name had been synonymous with fine dining on the upper concourse. Until Earth Eats. Now his table sat half empty, while crowds flocked to David and Aya's humble stall. Grell's pride curdled into resentment. His scaled skin flushed a darker shade of gray whenever he passed by, his slit, pupilled eyes glittering with venom. Aya felt it long before David acknowledged it. He's watching us, she whispered one night. David's reply was flat. Let him. But it was not enough to simply watch. One morning, Morton burst through the back door, scales quivering with outrage. Bad things in storage, the Brell declared, thrusting a stubby finger at the crates. David investigated. Inside one container of flour lay a pouch of fine powder, colorless, odorless, but deadly. Another box of produce contained a device emitting faint electromagnetic pulses designed to spoil perishables in hours. Aya's blood ran cold. If we had served that, customers would be poisoned, David finished grimly. His eyes hardened. This wasn't random. Someone sabotaged us. Grell, Morton growled. David exhaled slowly, almost certainly. Aya's hands shook as she touched the crate. If the authorities think we're careless, they won't, David said. His voice was calm, but his grip on the pouch of poison was white-knuckled. We'll find proof. Proof came swiftly. Security footage showed Grell himself entering their supply area under guise of delivery inspection. The evidence was undeniable. Governor Thorell summoned David and Aya to his office, a chamber lined with real wood panels and shelves of antique books, a sign of wealth and authority. His iridescent compound eyes flickered as he watched the footage replay. "This is troubling," the governor said smoothly. Troubling. David's voice was steel. "He tried to kill my customers." Thorell inclined his narrow head. "Chef Grell's influence has waned, but he still has allies. Revoking his license will not be simple." Aya clenched her fists. "He endangered dozens of lives. What more evidence do you need?" The governor's eyes reflected her in a dozen fractured images. "None. I will revoke his license. But understand such actions invite retaliation. Are you prepared for that?" David's gaze did not waver. "We're prepared." Thorell studied him for a long moment, then inclined his head. "Very well. The revocation will be issued at dawn." As they left, Aya whispered, "He'll come after us harder now." David's hand brushed at hers. "Then we'll be ready." But Grell was not working alone. Aya learned this in the most terrifying way. It was the night of their official reopening after the sabotage scare. The kitchen pulsed with energy. Customers crowded shoulder to shoulder, the scent of sizzling meats and fragrant sauces hanging heavy in the air. David moved like a conductor, directing Morton, Pax, and Aya in perfect synchrony. Then Aya saw them, two men in plain clothing, standing too stiffly near the back, their eyes too sharp, their focus not on the food but on her. The Krell. Her blood iced. She recognized their gait, their predatory stillness. She had seen soldiers like them march through Sereni's streets before the bombardment began. They approached the counter, smiling with thin lips. "Chef Reynolds," one said smoothly, "impressive reputation. We are admirers of your assistant's work." "Sereni techniques, are they not?" Aya froze. The words rang like a death sentence. David's expression did not change. "We don't discuss proprietary methods with customers. Enjoy the food or leave." The Krell agent's smile sharpened. "We prefer private demonstrations. Perhaps your assistant can show us crystallization." Aya's pulse thundered in her ears. Crystallization, her people's most guarded technique, the knowledge the Krell had slaughtered millions to claim. Before she could respond, a crash erupted. A serving tray slammed into the agent's head. Morton stood behind him, scales bristling, tiny eyes blazing. "Bad aliens don't touch Blue Lady," he roared. The second agent reached for a concealed weapon, but Pax appeared in a blur of motion, all four arms brandishing cleavers and ladles like an arsenal. "The chef requires assistance," he declared, loudly, drawing attention from every corner of the stall. Customers surged to their feet, wielding utensils, bottles, even chairs. Species that rarely agreed on anything stood shoulder to shoulder, glaring at the Krell intruders. Governor Thorell himself arrived, his compound eyes flashing. "What is the meaning of this?" "They are," Krell Morton said simply, "trying to take Blue Lady." "This is Dominion business," one agent snarled. "The Sereni female possesses restricted knowledge. We have jurisdiction." "Not on my station," Thorell said coldly, "and not when disrupting a cultural event I endorsed." Security officers moved in, weapons drawn, outnumbered and exposed. The agents surrendered. The stall erupted in cheers. Aya stood trembling, heart pounding as David guided her behind the counter. His hand pressed against her back, steady and firm. "You're safe," he murmured. But Aya knew the truth. They would not stop. The Krell had seen her, and they would come again. Later that night, as they cleaned the wreckage of the near disaster, Aya turned to David. "You should let me go," she whispered. "If I leave, maybe they'll follow me, not you." He rounded on her, eyes blazing. "No, David, no." His voice cracked like a whip. "Aya, I lost everything once: my career, my reputation, my home. But since you walked into my kitchen, I've had purpose again. If you think I'll give you up because of them, you don't understand me at all." Her throat ached. "But I don't want you destroyed because of me." He stepped closer, cupping her face in flour-dusted hands. "Listen to me. If survival means losing you, then what's the point of surviving?" Tears burned her eyes. She leaned into him, letting his warmth chase away the chill of fear. The next day the news broke. Grell's license revoked, his restaurant shuttered. Station gossip blazed with the scandal. Some cheered, others whispered of vengeance. David moved through the day with grim determination. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Not for him, not for the Krell." Aya shivered at the certainty in his voice. She wanted to believe in the sanctuary they had built in the community that had risen around them. But deep inside, she knew the storm had only just begun. And when that evening she saw Grell watching from across the concourse, eyes gleaming with hatred, flanked by shadowy figures, her fear crystallized. The Krell would not stop, and neither would he. The confrontation with the Krell agents sent shockwaves through Nexus Station. By dawn, rumors flew through the markets and corridors the Dominion had attempted an abduction and been thwarted not by soldiers, but by a community of cooks, customers, and common workers rallying behind a small human restaurant. Governor Threll moved quickly. With Grell's sabotage exposed, his license revoked, and his collaboration with the Krell whispered in every tavern, the governor seized the chance to restore order while elevating a new symbol of cultural harmony. Within 2 cycles, Earth Eats was invited to relocate. Not just anywhere, Threll offered them a prime location on the upper concourse, the sector of luxury establishments where the wealthy and influential dined. Aya stared at the holographic display of the proposed restaurant space. Gleaming counters, state-of-the-art stoves, a dining area overlooking the stars. She could hardly breathe. The upper concourse, she whispered, that's impossible. Not impossible, David said quietly, studying the schematics with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Just expensive and political. Threll's compound eyes glittered. Your fusion cuisine has increased station commerce by 23%. Imagine what it might do in the premium sector. Consider this, a mutually beneficial arrangement. As long as you continue to attract commerce, the Krell requests will find themselves delayed in processing. I exchanged a glance with David. The implication was clear protection in exchange for success. David folded his arms. We'll consider it. When they left the governor's office, Aya pressed close to him. This is everything we dreamed of. Why do you hesitate? David's expression was grim. Because nothing comes free. Threll sees us as a shield against the Krell. If we stumble, if business slows, that shield vanishes. Then we won't stumble, Aya said fiercely. We've come this far. We can go farther. For a moment he studied her, then his stern face softened. He touched her cheek gently. I believe you. That night in the quiet of their quarters, Aya lay awake while David worked at the counter sketching plans for the new kitchen. She studied him, the set of his shoulders, the furrow in his brow, the way his hands traced the page with precision. This man, once disgraced, had built something extraordinary from ashes, and he had given her back her dignity, her hope, her life. David, she said softly. He looked up. Why did you save me that first night? You didn't know me. I could have been anyone. He leaned back, considering. I didn't think. You looked hungry. I had food. It was that simple. Her throat tightened. She rose, crossed the room, and took his hands in hers. Simple, she whispered. But it changed everything. He squeezed her fingers. For me, too. The words hung in the air. Then David reached into his pocket and drew out a small box. Aya blinked, startled. What's that? He opened it to reveal a ring of gold inlaid with tiny fragments of translucent crystal that shimmered faintly. She recognized them instantly. Serene crystal, salvaged from the single piece of jewelry she had carried through exile. I had the fragments set into this, David said quietly. On Earth we have a tradition. When 2 people want to join their lives, they seal it with a promise. Aya of the House of Morning Light. Will you marry me? Her breath caught. Tears filled her eyes. David, I was hiding when you found me, he continued, voice steady but thick with emotion. Afraid of who I'd been. Afraid to ever be David Reynolds again. You changed that. You changed me. You gave me back meaning. She swallowed hard. I thought I had lost everything. My people, my world, my family. But then you gave me food and work and love. You gave me a future. Her hands trembled as she touched the ring. Yes, she whispered. Yes, David. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and the golden band seemed to glow against her azure skin. When he kissed her, it was not frantic as before, but steady and sure, a vow sealed in warmth. That night they celebrated their union not with words but with closeness, their bodies and spirits intertwining like flavors in perfect balance. The following cycles were a blur of preparations. The new restaurant named Fusion took shape. Morton oversaw deliveries with zealous protectiveness, Packs organized supplies with mechanical precision. Customers old and new watched with anticipation as the modest kitchen that had once been a refuge transformed into a crown jewel of Nexus Station. But the changes went beyond walls and menus. Aya herself changed. She stood taller now, her braids adorned with silver ornaments, her markings radiant with health. Customers treated her not as a refugee, but as a chef, a partner, a figure of respect. And when whispers of her Sireni heritage spread, something remarkable happened. Rather than shunning her, the station's residents rallied. She carries the last recipes of her people, one merchant said. She is a living archive, another declared. The idea spread like wildfire. Aya was not just a cook, but a cultural treasure. Eric Donovan, the Earth Trade representative, came to them one evening bearing documents. "We're filing a petition with the Galactic Heritage Committee," he explained, "to grant Aya protected status as a cultural ambassador. If it passes, the Krell can't touch her without violating 6 interstellar treaties." Aya's eyes widened, tears shimmering. "You would do this? For me?" Eric smiled. "For you, for all of us. Your food is more than sustenance, it's memory connection. It's worth protecting." David slipped an arm around her shoulders, his voice thick. "Looks like you're not the last Serene, Aya. You're the first of something new." Their love became inseparable from their work. Each night after service, they experimented with new dishes, blending techniques and flavors until laughter and taste blurred into intimacy. David taught her earth dances in the empty dining hall. She taught him Serene meditation, guiding his breath until even his restless mind stilled. One evening, they stood together on the balcony of their new home, above Fusion, watching the stars. On Serene, Aya said softly, "We believe true unions created harmony beyond the sum of their parts, that two souls could fuse like flavors." David smiled, drawing her close. "Like us." The night before Fusion's grand opening, Aya lit a small candle on their table, a Serene tradition for new beginnings. She sang a fragment of an old hymn, her voice trembling with both grief and hope. David listened, his hand covering hers. "No matter what comes tomorrow," he murmured, "we face it together." Aya leaned against him, her heart steady at last. Together. Transition. The storm had not passed. The Krell would not forget, and Chef Grell's hatred still burned in the shadows. But for this moment, Aya and David had forged a sanctuary of love, honor, and protection. They had taken scraps and despair and turned them into joy. They had taken loneliness and turned it into unity. They had taken 2 broken lives and fused them into something stronger. The proposal, the protection, the recognition, all were milestones. But the journey was far from over. And as the doors of Fusion prepared to open to the galaxy, both knew their greatest challenges and their greatest triumphs still lay ahead. The upper concourse of Nexus Station gleamed like a crown jewel. Transparent panels revealed the endless stars beyond, while polished metal floors reflected the light of neon advertisements in strolling dignitaries. It was a place of wealth, influence, and prestige. And now, at its very center, stood Fusion. The restaurant was magnificent. State-of-the-art stoves gleamed like jewels, counters of smooth black stone glowed faintly under the light, and tables were arranged to give each guest a view of the cosmos. Soft lighting set the atmosphere of intimacy and sophistication. David wore a crisp white chef's jacket embroidered with the word Fusion over his heart, while Aya stepped gracefully in a gown of deep blue that shimmered against her azure skin. Silver ornaments glittered in her white braids, the markings of her heritage displayed proudly. "You look beautiful," David murmured, taking her hand. "And you look like the chef you were always meant to be," she replied, her voice soft with pride. David Reynolds no longer hiding. The words struck him deeply. He realized she was right. For the first time since his downfall, he felt no shame in his name, only strength. Tonight was not about the past, it was about creation, about future, about fusion. The doors opened. Guests streamed in, station officials, traders, customers. From their old stall, even Governor Threll himself, his iridescent eyes glittering as he surveyed the space. "A significant improvement," Chef Reynolds, the governor, observed smoothly. "Your talents deserve such a showcase." "Thank you," Governor David replied with practiced composure. "We appreciate your support in recent matters." "Justice must be served," Threll said, and though his tone was polite, his eyes carried steel. and the Dominion must learn that our station is not to be trifled with. The words were reassuring, but David remained wary. As the evening progressed, laughter and conversation filled the restaurant. Guests sampled dishes that blended Earth's spices with serene elegance, and every bite seemed to spark wonder. Merchants exclaimed at the complexity, officials praised the innovation, and simple workers smiled with full bellies. For Aya, it was breathtaking. To see beings of so many species united by food, her food, their food, was proof that something new, something better was possible. She moved among the tables with grace, explaining flavors, listening to stories, sharing laughter. David moved between kitchen and floor, his stern demeanor softening into something almost warm. Their dream was real. It shattered in a heartbeat. David had gone to the storage room to retrieve a bottle of wine when the door closed behind him with a hiss. Quite the success story, a familiar voice sneered. David turned. Chef Grell stood blocking the exit, his gray-scaled skin flushed with malice. His slit pupils narrowed to hateful slits. "You're not welcome here, Grell," David said flatly. "The governor revoked your license." "The governor is a fool," Grell hissed. "As are you if you think this is over. You humiliated me, stole my customers, took everything that was mine." David's jaw clenched. "You did that yourself when you tried to poison people." Grell's lipless mouth twisted in something like a smile. "I made a new arrangement. The Krell reward loyalty, and tonight they get what they want, your precious Serene pet. And I get my restaurant back." Before David could move, Grell lunged forward, pressing a small device to his neck. Electricity surged through his body, locking his muscles in agony. He collapsed conscious, but paralyzed. "The paralysis will fade," Grell whispered, crouching beside him. "Long enough for my associates to collect her. By the time you can move, she'll be gone." Rage roared in David's chest. He forced his fingers to twitch, but his body refused to obey. Grell straightened. "Enjoy your success, Reynolds. It dies tonight." He slipped out, leaving David trapped on the floor. On the dining floor, I entertained two well-dressed aliens who introduced themselves as admirers. Their questions grew sharper, too specific, asking about Serene techniques, about crystallization, about secrets no outsider should know. Aya's instinct screamed, "Perhaps you could demonstrate one press gesturing to a quieter corner." "I'm afraid I'm needed in the kitchen," she said firmly, backing away. "Now, Serene," the other growled, reaching for her arm. Before he could touch her, a tray slammed into his head with a clang. Morton stood behind him, stocky frame trembling with fury. "Bad aliens don't touch Blue Lady," he bellowed. The second agent reached for a concealed weapon, but Pax leapt forward, all four arms wielding knives, ladles, and a pan like weapons of war. "The chef requires assistance," he declared loudly. The restaurant froze. Then slowly customers rose from their tables, dozens of species, gripping utensils, bottles, even chairs. The agents were surrounded. "What is the meaning of this?" Governor Threll demanded, striding forward. "They are Krell agents," Morton snarled, trying to take her. "This is a Dominion matter," one agent snapped. "The Serene possesses restricted knowledge." "Not on my station," Threll thundered, "and not at an event I endorsed." His compound eyes flashed. "Security?" Officers swarmed, seizing the agents. In the chaos, Aya looked around wildly. "Where's David?" As if in answer, the storage door burst open. David stumbled out, supported by Eric Donovan, his body still shaking from paralysis. "Grell," he rasped. "He's working with them." The room erupted in uproar. The Krell agents, realizing their mission was exposed, surrendered without resistance. Aya rushed to David, supporting his weight. "Are you hurt?" "Just my pride," he managed. His gaze burned. "Where is Grell?" Attempting to flee, Eric said grimly, "but security has locked down all departures. He won't get far." Threll's voice rang out cold and decisive. "Grell will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of station law. His collaboration with foreign agents is treason, and the Krell will face diplomatic consequences." Applause erupted, not for the governor, but for Aya and David, for the restaurant, for the unity their food had inspired. David looked at Aya, his strength returning as her fingers intertwined with his. "I think we should serve dessert," he said hoarsely. Aya's lips trembled into a smile. "A fusion custard, sweet with fire, just like us." The following cycles transformed their lives. Grell was tried and exiled to a remote agricultural colony, stripped of his license. The Krell, humiliated by the public failure, retreated under diplomatic pressure. And Aya's petition for cultural heritage status was approved. She was recognized as a living ambassador of Serene cuisine, her knowledge protected by interstellar law. Fusion flourished. Lines stretched for months. Critics from across the galaxy called it the ultimate expression of culinary diplomacy. Customers described meals not as dishes, but as experiences. The restaurant became not just a place to eat, but a place to belong. Aya and David's love deepened with every passing day. They taught each other dances, recipes, stories. At night in their quarters, they celebrated their union with passion and tenderness. Their love, like their food, was a fusion that transcended boundaries. On the one-year anniversary of Aya's first bowl of soup, David closed the restaurant to regular customers. Instead, he filled the tables with friends, Morton Pax, Eric Governor Threll, and dozens of others who had stood by them. Aya wore a shimmering gown, her markings glowing proudly. David prepared a menu that told their story from that first simple soup to the fusion dishes that had changed everything. Midway through the evening, he took her hand and led her to the balcony overlooking the station. From his pocket, he produced a small oak box. Inside lay a ring set with serene crystal fragments. He knelt, voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. "Aya of the House of Morning Light, will you marry me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered yes, 1,000 times yes. Cheers rose from inside as their friends witnessed the embrace that sealed their promise. The surprises weren't over. Later that night, Aya pressed a hand to her abdomen, guiding David's hand there. "I was going to tell you tonight," she whispered. "I visited Dr. Lin. It seems we've created a different kind of fusion, the first human Serene child." David stared, breath stolen. Then he pulled her into his arms, overcome. "A baby. Our baby." Aya's smile glowed brighter than the stars. The ultimate recipe. Equal parts you and me, with a dash of the unexpected. The future loomed bright. The Earth Culinary Academy offered them professorships funding to document Serene cuisine. They could split their time between Earth and Nexus, preserving the restaurant, while sharing their art across human space. Their child would be raised between worlds, proof that even in destruction, life could bloom anew. On the balcony watching the stars, David held Aya close. "From a starving girl in rags to this," he whispered. "Who could have imagined?" Aya leaned into him, her smile tender. "When my world burned, I thought I had lost everything. But the universe had another recipe waiting. You, us, our child." They kissed slow and sure as the galaxy stretched infinite around them. And though threats would come again, though the Krell would never forget the bond they had forged, like their cuisine was stronger than fear. Fusion was not just a restaurant. It was love. It was legacy. It was humanity at its finest, building hope where none should exist, finding unity where others saw only difference. Aya and David had turned despair into delighted, survival into celebration. And as they fell asleep in each other's arms, their unborn child, nestled safely within the universe itself, seemed to whisper approval. The perfect fusion.